and we've been on a really interesting study tour to Bulgaria, and we've seen a lot of diversity between the farms that we've visited, and it's been really interesting on the different takes of the different farms, how they're running their businesses and how they see the future going forward.
First day we went to Mr. Petrov's Co-operative, and he has 700 odd farms in his co-op. A good insight into how Bulgaria life and farming life used to be, I would have thought. He seems to be stuck in his old-fashioned ways a bit, but it was good to see how it was done in the past, and then the next 2 days of how it has improved. I mean, the way we saw it from out as a farmer, he was a bit, as I say, stuck in his ways with no fresh machinery, no investment. His grain stores were just as they were years ago, and all his machinery was what he'd probably bought from other European countries, a bit dilapidated, and maintenance, I guess, would be high on his agenda.
We were at a farm yesterday. It was a family farm in Obnova, I believe the village was called, and they're growing wheat in quite a large scale, sunflowers, which are grown quite readily over here, maize, and then they were doing market garden vegetables as well, and a lot of the market garden vegetables were sold from the roadside, which was cutting out a big proportion of their transport costs. Wheat was sold to a group like what we do in the UK, such as Frontier, perhaps people may use. The things I would take away from that is their production isn't as high as ours, but they've got a lot of labour for the acres that they're sort of working on. But they are trying to modernise, which we saw a big difference from that farm and a previous farm we've been on, where they weren't trying to modernise, but this farm yesterday was very modern. It was coming up, newer machinery, using GPS controlled equipment, which was good to see. But yeah, it was a lot to take away in one day.
Yesterday we visited a 4,000 hectare farm near Krushovitsa, of which 2,000 hectares was run for alfalfa. We were shown around the processing plant, where it was dried and baled into just short of a ton bales and put into containers for Far East, basically. A very well-spoken chap who told us all about it. A huge operation, huge farming operation, which included just over 1,000 tenants. Some of it also owned, but the general consensus was that alfalfa was the main product of the farm, and growing wheat was a minor operation and not really a big deal to them. Labour seemed to be of a very similar value, or wages of the same value as the other farms we'd seen previously, but the main difference was the huge amount of predominantly case machinery, big machinery, huge amount of machinery. A fantastically well organised and growing business, from what we could see.
We also had a very interesting talk from Professor Atanassov, and he is the professor at the Genome Center in Bulgaria itself, and he talked a lot about gene editing and the future prospects for farming in Bulgaria, where he thought the land was very fertile. They had an abundance of water, spring water, very good supply of water, but also the good climate for growing many crops, up to about 40 crops. And he thought that the way forward, the future would be slightly organic, and that he could see the need to reduce the use of fertiliser, and it always sort of pointing in the direction of that we need to be really thinking about keeping people really healthy and producing food that will be sort of better for people and going forward.
Right, yeah, what really is taken away from here is a huge difference between what UK farm policy and Bulgarian farming policy is really like. UK farming policy, especially what's going to go on in the future, is very much geared towards the farmed environment, whereas Bulgarian policy is still very much a production-based policy, probably now. So, especially listening to the professor at the university, very much based on human nutrition, and that is a huge marked difference, really, between the two policies. Yeah. Whereas when we asked the farmers regarding how they viewed, have they got any issues regarding pollution in agriculture, most of them said no pollution, no problems at all. We've got plenty of water under the ground. Marked difference to what we have back in Norfolk Broads, where licences have been taken away, and we're very much and agriculture has very much been restricted, and that's in that sense.
I'm asked to take back what are my thoughts of the trip, and I think the greatest conclusion I can come to is we've had a passage through the agriculture of this country, from the transgression it's had from communism through to the latest technology, where they have actually taken young men with no agricultural training, and they have developed these young men to trading with the Chinese, to trading with people in Saudi Arabia. They have travelled widely, and they have used those experiences to help us. And I have already met people here who are using that information, which they're taking home with them, and hopefully to benefit their own businesses. The second journey we had, being to a more traditional farmer, a family farm, it was pretty obvious that they were gradually approaching the problem of the changes in the CAP environment of payments, which could have a detrimental effect upon their ability to continue to do capital investment. He was progressive, he had an understanding of the seeds and the use of modern technology, but he was I think he will struggle in future, as the level of income he's able to claim is going to disappear from him. Tragically, the first person we met was a very traditional local farmer managing a cooperative with hundreds of members, probably some of them with only a hectare of land in this cooperative. Total inability to understand modern technology, was totally against the introduction of anything that would change the status quo. He was supportive of his men, whereas the last people we met, when asked the question what is their social attitude to unemployment and that, they said that is the state's problem, that is not our problem. So we have seen this progress from the total communism protection of the people through to one where you're on your own, mate. We then were finally treated, and I hope we are going to be able to invite him to come to the UK and talk to people, and he has agreed when I asked him if he would come, a professor in genetics, who was very, very open concerning his attitude to the EEC and the problems we're facing with the loss of pesticides and the slow introduction of gene editing. And it would be wonderful if we could get him over, because he is fully supportive and feels that as Brexit progresses, the UK will be one of the last peoples in Europe, countries in Europe, who will be able to perhaps introduce that technology fairly quickly. The answer I go back with at home is that there is hope for us, but there's going to be a period of 2 or 3 years as we transgress from the old type technology of chemical industry to the new type technology. We're going to have to find a way of getting government to allow us to speed it up.